Hi there, Casey. Hi, Danny. Ruth Shalom. Oh, gentlemen singing in the corner. Oscar, Oscar, hola. Oye, Oscar, todo el mundo te espero otro tour. Hi, everyone. Hi, Catherine. Linda. Hey, Sid. Nice to see you there. I'm just deciding how. Hi, Donna. Hi, Cheryl. Nice to see you. Natalie, bonjour. I'm sorry. I'm still feeling as though I'm just not quite as centered as I could be. Uh, Jill, Cordoba was lovely, but it was a little rainy yesterday. How's that looking? It is gorgeous here. Yeah, it's almost meditation. Feels that way. This is a beautiful day, although I feel like it could get a bit of rain. They need rain. So, hi, Susan. Hey, Aaron. Nice. It's been a while. Nice to see you. Sayuri. Hola. So, I have kind of a million things. I know Oscar's here. I said hi to him, Ruth. It's lovely to have him here. Hi, Tassels. Um, in the time I have, there's not as much as I can fit in. I'm just sorry. Hi, Elise. Hey, hugs to you. There he is. Oscar, you need to put up a tour, pal. Now, we're going to actually start. Oh, we're nearly on time. Hi. Oh, Catherine. Hello, Catherine. I would like to refer to myself as your son. By the way, everyone, first of all, we're specifically on time right now. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. If there is the odd chance you have not met me before or you don't know who I am, my name is Patrick Toomey. That's both Jen and Jen. And I am not from here, needless to say. I am from a very, very different place, bound from the Canadian Rockies, but I am over here working. As many of you know, I've been running a tour here. I still am. And this is sort of the last free afternoon that the group have on the tour. And so I thought it'd be fun to take you out for a little walk because it's a gorgeous day. I am in the city of Seville, Sevilla, here in Spain. It is pretty remarkable as a place. There's some people just taking a photo over there. Seville is gorgeous. I have quite a lot of history I want to squeeze in. I'm not pretending at all to be an expert on these places, but you'll know why. Oh, March, yeah, it is warm. Yesterday was cool and rainy in Cordoba. I took a train from Madrid down there, did a tour, and then came here. Had an excellent tour this morning. Again, every local guide I've had on these trips have just been excellent. And I think a few reasons. One, because they're very well trained here, but also the fact that they, I think so many of them have had no work for a couple of years that it's really all the kind of top ones that are working on. John, I think this is my favorite city too. Now, I'm not going to be able to frame it all in, but I do want to start with just a little reveal here at the moment. Sorry, I'm squinting so much. I might put my sunglasses on. But right there, and I will do a twist. Cindy, I use local guides when I'm in places either that require them by license or places like these where I haven't been back to for a long time. Now, hang on tight because I'm going to give you a Toomey twist, everyone. Okay, so hang on to your seats. There we go. Plus, I like to use them for just their own business, right? Oh, boy, that's not hanging on the frame. Look at that. Okay, I'll have to go back. Sorry, you could have taken a postcard there, but the gimbal is still funny. It says 1492 at the top. It has a lion, but this is actually a monument to Fernando. And Fernando as in Magellan, right? Who was a Portuguese sailor, but was the first one who connected the two oceans by going around the bottom of South America, Magellan Straits. I have been there many times. Oh, that's good, Donna. Thanks. Yeah. The gimbal is just a tiny bit off. I honestly think my iPhone, which has this wonderful camera in it, but it's just so heavy that I think it just messes up a little bit some of the balance. So have a photo there. Now, I'd like to get walking quite quickly, a bit faster than maybe I normally like to do, but do look at the lovely palm trees and the beautiful blue sky. So Sevilla is about 750,000 people, so less than a million. And the province, so the region around is about 1.5 million. Yesterday, as part of my tour, I included a visit to extra virgin olive oil production and tasting. And that was really, I mean, you go to these sort of sales things, but it's just so worth it because, of course, that's a huge part, thanks, Marlene, huge part of the economy in this region agriculturally. We're in Andalusia. And what did I do last night with the group? It's the first thing you have to do when you come to this famous city and go to flamenco. So flamenco dancing developed here, but its roots are not here. Look at this banyan tree. And a gentleman on my tour asked me today, how old would this banyan tree be? Well, banyan trees come from India. And so I have to try and, so I have to try and work out when the first tree could have been brought here. It wouldn't be, so this tree can't be any more than at most about 700 years old, just by the nature of that sort of age, right? And here's the young school, a children's school, but look at the lovely tile work. So about 1.5 million people. Seville is widely considered one of the most beautiful cities in Spain and the Iberian Peninsula, and with good reason. But the history of it is just so incredible. So here we go in not a lot of time. Let's try and race through the history of this incredible city because it goes back in terms of continuous inhabitation, roughly, hi Monaco, goes back about 2,700 years of fairly continuous inhabitation, right? And of course, there was a strong Roman presence here, starting at about the first century BC. Robert, there you are, pal. So going to the first century, but really what we start to see architecturally through here. Now, when I was in Cordoba yesterday, Cordoba is home to what was the first Roman bridge um, over the Guadalquivir River, which is the one navigable river that's entirely within Spain. It originates further inland from Cordoba, flows through Cordoba, which it was navigable to that point during Roman times, and then it came down through Seville here, and it emptied out by Cadiz, right? Or Cadiz, with a Z on the end, or Cadiz, as they would say here. Now, please remember that, because that's so tied in to this story. Lynn, I don't know, but flamenco, I'll come back to that in a minute, but I do know, actually, I saw a picture of them. Hi, Jean, is everybody else hearing me okay? Is the sound, get a thumbs up? Because yeah, if you're not, then it might be a case of wanting to put on some headphones or something like that. But I'm sorry if you're not hearing me well, but I am speaking quite loudly, and I don't want to obviously yell as I wander down the streets here. Okay, nice that everyone else. Elizabeth, hola. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to see and do in here, and there's so many of these incredible walls. In fact, why don't we come down through here? So really what we talk about archaeologically, if I just come back, so there's this fabulous bridge that was a Roman bridge over the river at Cordoba. That's how far they would travel. So that is where they would travel over. That bridge was rebuilt 4 different occasions, but feel free to Google the Roman bridge, or the bridge as they call it in Cordoba, and you'll see what we're talking about. So that was the great bridge over the river. It's no longer navigable up to that point. But it was then rebuilt by the Arabs. So the Arab invasions, the Moorish invasions in the 7th, 8th centuries, they came in and established themselves all through Spain, the entire Iberian Peninsula. And we talk about it on every tour, you can't avoid it. And you have this incredible mix in all these cities up to the year 1492, where you had an Arab population, large Jewish populations, and then, of course, substantial, Catholic Christian population, needless to say, right? So you had all 3 populations living together until, of course, everyone who was non-Catholic was expelled. Oh, I'm going to try and sneak down here. Just don't put the camera in people's faces. So the Arabs come in here, and this was really their capital. So the Alcazar, and I'm going to show you some of the walls of it. That means they look like a great reception here down these hallways. So the Alcazar is the longest continuously used royal palace in Europe. Now it's owned by the city now, and it's offered to the Spanish royal family. But that was all the headquarters of course, very narrow. Yeah, lovely narrow streets. Here's an old hospital. By the way, that's the source of the word hospitality, if you've ever wondered. But they built a huge minaret, a huge tower. Judy, I honestly don't know. I think it is, though. It's a good question. Look at the lovely balconies up there. So, oh, it's just so beautiful here. So I'm going to just go quiet just for a second. These lovely patios, but I'm just going to sneak by because I think I can keep talking. Famous for ceramics. But I want to head down into the main square because in the time we have today, I really want to try and squeeze in what would normally be about a 2-hour tour. There's so much to show and talk about. But the Arabs established themselves here. They built the mighty Alcazar. They built their big minaret. Now, for those of you who joined us when we did a tour in Istanbul, you might remember that the Hagia Sophia was, of course, the largest church in Christendom for several hundred years. And then it was converted to a mosque. Well, here, the minaret was converted to a Christian tower, and then the construction of Seville Cathedral, which I will show you in a few minutes' time. So interesting conversions both ways during this very, very tumultuous history that happened throughout this world. Look at these gorgeous little parks. And just so you can see, these are the famous orange trees. They're very bitter oranges, but they make this delicious marmalade. And I assure you, even though I wasn't hungry at all this morning, I got up and had fresh juice, and I also made marmalade, or had made toast so I could have the marmalade Normally in Spain every day I have the bread with the tomato and olive oil on it, but while you're here you have to have the marmalade. I might even snag a couple of little tubs of it and bring them home with me. I might just have to do that. My dad used to love marmalade. He came from that sort of culture. Um, but Anthony Square is just wonderful. So there was the Reconquest, principally by Isabel and Ferdinand, the reconquest of Spain, which of course was concluded in 1492. But in 1400, when they took a hold of this city of Seville, they said they wanted to build a cathedral that was so massive and so impressive that they would think they were crazy. It does. It was very low down here. Look at this. Old Roman gold coins. They're not real, of course, but pretty interesting. And they set about building what ended up being the largest Gothic church in the world, and either the third or fourth largest church in the world. But that is really just that conversion of what was historically Arabic Moorish architecture. And these are some of the walls right here of the Alcazar. And of course, tomorrow I'm going to Ronda. I won't have time to give you a tour there. I'm sorry, because it's just so beautiful. But from Ronda, then you make your way onto Granada or down to the coast. The flowers are all coming out into bloom, ladies and gentlemen. So part of it is this lovely spring-like environment right now. It's been cool on this whole tour, but now it's just all warmed up, and it's warmed up in a really lovely way. But in the summer here, Seville can get up to 40 degrees Celsius. That's well over 100, right? So that's a whole other level of heat altogether. Now, it is, of course, religious monuments absolutely everywhere. Shall I give you one little sneak peek? Let me give you one little sneak peek, because there's white pigeons, which I would call a dove, but there you're starting to see part of the tower. I'm not even going to zoom in from here. I'm just going to give you a nice postcard that way, and then I have to sing a little Leonard Cohen. Like a bird on a wire, and so forth and so on. Now, you have the Reconquest here. They start to build a massive cathedral before 1492. Why is that significant? Well, as you can tell here just by this architecture, this was all Moorish architecture, but they start to build before 1492. But in 1492, of course, Christopher Columbus goes over and lands in Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, which incidentally argues DR, Dominican Republic, still says that Christopher Columbus is buried there. Most people disagree with that, particularly the people of Seville. We'll come back to that in a minute. Well, as soon as that contact happens, he returns to Spain. Of course, he was Italian, and he proves that the world is at least navigable. You know, they basically agreed at that point that it was round. Goes back on a second journey, touches along Yucatan, and then Seville es encantador, absolutamente. Then on his third journey, and that's the one that's really significant in my mind, because that's where he goes and names the Bay of Portobello. Thanks, Jen. And he names the Bay of Portobello. And of course, I have a YouTube video about Portobello, and just about 2.5 weeks ago, I was there. I can give you just a little peek in here. You need tickets and all sorts of things to go in. Yeah, a segue would be fun. Do you know, Robert, I was actually playing with it. I'd end up tripping. I still haven't given you the view yet that I want to give, but I want to just, there's no way I can frame this whole thing in. But they go to Portobello, and they start extracting, of course, just incredible quantities of wealth from the Americas. Now, I'm not pretending to be an expert on this city, but I do claim to have some pretty strong historical knowledge of South America. Well, that wealth comes over here, and this is where that wealth is spent. Look at this now. There's no point in me trying to twist the camera or anything. Have a look at this. So that tower, the Gironda, and that means that giro is to turn around in Spanish. So I'll give you one view at the top. And so from the top, you can see in all directions. For 600 years, this was the tallest building here. And now there's a modern bank tower. So that's changed the game a little bit. But this tower, oh, hey, Annie. I didn't come, you know, the problem, Sayuri, is I had tickets for the Alcazar for my group, which meant me putting in passport numbers and names. Like, there's so many rules. And now, the last time I was here, you could walk into the cathedral. You don't. You pay to go in now. I understand it, but it is just all of that's become more complicated than it used to be. And so we're in the famous Central Plaza here. But when you see that tower, if you've been to Casablanca, for example, you see it. At the time it was built, it was the tallest tower in the world. And then they finished the cathedral, the first round of it in 1507. That means already gold and wealth had come back from the Americas. And you have some of the biggest, well, it's the largest Gothic church in the world. It is so overwhelming. I think there's 59 or something little inlets around it, different sizing. Here's the gentleman trying to sell me a horse run. But what I'd like to do is actually just do, I think with the time I have, a loop right around. I'm not going to be able to frame it all in, but that's sort of the point. I remember when I have gone in here with groups in the past, the argument is you just have to go in and take a moment and just sort of take it all in. It's so overwhelming. It is also, of course, the fact that in 1492, everyone who wasn't Catholic was booted out of this country. It was pretty significant. They set out to make this the most important. I don't know why. MB, do you know the answer to that? I expect it's because they have yellow on one of their flags here, so it could well be that. But the crests on the side, there's the same Spanish crest. If you've ever done one of my history talks where I show you the coins from Potosí, the silver that came over, that's the same crest. You see in all the Spanish money, and that is basically the origin of the dollar symbol as you see today. You see the pillar either side. Let me zoom in for a second. You see how it's got sign around it? So those lines would go through symbols of the mines, and that is where you had a trademark in the early days, and that was even the official currency of the United States until the Civil War when they developed a central bank. That's how significant it all is. So we're just going to circumnavigate this massive, massive structure. I'm not going to make it in there. Try and give you a sense of how high it was. It was probably, at the time of completion, it was the biggest building in the whole wide world. And let's have a look at this for a second. Ruth, I'm sure you could read that for us. But that is saying Sephardi or Sephardic. This was all Jewish quarter through here, and of course the Spanish Jews or Sephardic Jews. I can hear the bells, sorry. I'll just let you hear them for a second. Let me just scan up. Okay, this. That blue sky. Sort of made for photographs, isn't it? Yeah. So I guess it's, 4 o'clock on the nose. I guess that's why the bells are ringing. I can even show you the bell tower. It's just a nice image of people going by. Have a look up here for a second. I'm really glad you're hearing that. Otherwise, I have got a big problem in my head. Now, what I'd like to do, so I am a little bit later doing a visit on a different platform, and I'm going to do it in a whole different part of town, but I wanted to absolutely make it here, and I'd like to come around and then try and make it out in the time we have out by the river as well, because I haven't finished the importance of the story. If you've been to Portobello with me, if you've so I'm just getting wedged between horses and carts and everything. There's the entrance in there now. Giralda. So that's where you go up and you walk up 35 platforms. They're not steps, they're just platforms that go circular around. There's certainly no lift or elevator inside there. Son las 4 de la tarde, Elizabeth, aquí. Everyone, by the way, if you don't know, this is my friend Elizabeth Puma from Arequipa in Peru, who's saying hi. You can certainly see the inspiration of architecture. Although Arequipa, I think, is inspired a little more from other places, although this makes sense. And because if you've been down to Portobello with me, if you were in Panama with me, I talked so much about the legalization of piracy by both the French and the British Empire. Why did they legalize piracy? Well, it was to get all the silver that was being extracted from Peru, which is now Bolivia in that particular case. At that time, that's right, Donna, yeah. And so they were extracting so much wealth that who chased them all the way from Portobello to Havana and across the ocean? Indeed, Henry Morgan himself. Why do I mention that? Because Henry Morgan died of yellow fever back in Portobello. Portobello was the Caribbean side of the walk, the Camino de Cruces, the Camino Real, which predates, of course, the actual Panama Canal, where they extracted, more wealth than the world had ever seen. So he follows him all the way back here to Spain. And where do they land? They land in Cadiz. They land in Cadiz because it's the mouth of the river where they can navigate up, and he burns Cadiz. And so that is why all of a sudden, just give you one little peek inside, by the way, all of a sudden Seville actually becomes the port itself. Not a gorgeous view, everyone. So Seville becomes the port for all of the wealth that is traveling from the Americas. Incidentally, do notice that I really don't use the term New World, and they still do use the term discovery here, and they use all that kind of language. And in fact, there's a building just on the main square here, El Edificio de los Indios, and it's where they talk about the Indians, and it's not meant, it's actually where so many of the original documents are still housed, which is wonderful. But Valerie, I'd love to be getting a haircut here, but my hair's too short. But I do. Why do you ask that question? It's a fun one. I do love to get haircuts in every place I go. I just doesn't grow fast enough. Although I do have I did find a new cap, see, and it was only €7, so I bought it. And with the sun, that's why I wear the cap. I don't think I like wearing hats, but I wear it because of the sun. Um, Okay, sorry. So you see, I'm still walking around the same building. Can you imagine? So you might remember the other day, if you joined me in Madrid, I said Madrid in 1600 had a population of 30,000 people. Seville was probably somewhat equivalent to that at that time, right? Now, Greater Seville, the greater province, is only 1.5 million, but that puts it in some perspective. This building would have been the most just out of control, gigantic thing you could possibly lay your eyes on, and understandably so. And there's the buttresses, which of course endemic to Gothic architecture. Um, it was because of the haircut on me. By the way, you will notice, everyone, for those who know us, know our family, Dankeschön, Hans. You'll notice that Finn Toomey is not watching this tour, and that is because he is somewhere over the middle of the Pacific Ocean right now, flying from Los Angeles to Fiji. So I set an alarm and woke up early enough to chat with him before he took off. He will be putting up tours, particularly in Tasmania, which I think is going to be a really neat thing for everyone to get to share with. So this becomes the main port. This is the wealth that comes in all the way from the Americas and changes Spain, and of course causes massive inflation and changes the world as we know it today. And then that wealth shows up in the cathedrals. This one, Toledo, all of them, but those are the real biggies. All part of that great movement. Now, buried in here officially, seems to be Christopher Columbus. Uh, I'll ask Finn if he can do us a selfie from Fiji. Now, there's really no point of even doing a twist to look up here, but let's just give a little bit of sense of these massive, massive windows. Have a look at this now. So Christopher Columbus dies in Spain, but they took his body back to the Dominican Republic, right? Which, of course, very important Spanish center of the Caribbean at that point. And they bury him there in the cathedral. But when Napoleon invades, remember, Napoleon invades here. They get here in about 1809, 1810, which really causes all the independence throughout the Americas. And that's a very important switch. So that's suddenly when the criollos, the native-born elite down in South America, all declare independence. And so by them declaring their own independence, that is really the end of Spanish America, with a few exceptions, Cuba, DR, a few places like that. But as Napoleon invades, they take his body away and take it over to Cuba. Well, then Cuba gets independent, Spanish-American War, and then they bring his body here. Now, they did DNA testing on it a few years ago. This is probably the best frame I can get. Now, we're going to get new and old just here in a second. Just hang on tight, because here comes one of the modern tramways. I remember these trams. They're actually extending them now, which is wonderful. How's that for integration of new and old architecture? And there was the tallest tower in the world for the longest time. So it is really incredible. And there's the building I was telling about with Los Indios, which all of the documentation of the establishment of Spanish colonization, conquest in the New World. So there's so much just in this one square right here. Now, he died, they brought his body back here, they did DNA testing, and it turns out that it seems to be, they actually went to the bones, they went into the bones, to the bone marrow, you can read about it, and they came out, and it looks like he's related to other people from that family line, so it's probably fair he's here. The Dominican Republic refuses to have the body that's buried there be tested, so nobody knows 100%, but it seems that he's buried here. What I like to talk about, in both the good and the bad way, is how he probably died. Not 100% sure. He wasn't that old. He's just in his 50s, but that wasn't a bad life for that period of time. We're talking 1507, I think he died, or 1506, which is 3 years after he named Portobello in what is now Panama. And so he probably died of deep systemic gout. Thanks, Judy. Now, if anyone has any familiarity with gout, I understand that you really don't want it. I think that's kind of easy to understand. It's obviously a very painful, rancid form. They say he did more traveling than dead and alive, but incredibly painful. And it was so through his body that his eyes were bleeding towards the end. So his last 10 years would have been just pure agony. But tied in with that, it's because, what causes gout? Well, too much alcohol, too much sugar, way too much salt. It's dehydration. It's all sorts of things that are factored into it. Now, it is an untruth, and it's a continuously repeated untruth, that in medieval Europe, everyone just drank booze. That's not true. They had well water. However, if you were on a ship for months and months and months, well, you certainly weren't getting all the fresh fruit and veg you would need, and you probably were having fermented alcohol all the time and preserved meats. And so many of them struggled with gout. Now, so many of them struggled with gout. Let me just tell you a little bit more about that, because the Portuguese royal family, the elite, were struggling so much with gout that they actually brought tobacco back from the Americas, thinking it was maybe a treatment for gout. What a way to double kill. By the way, real casada de moneda. That was the old mint right here. And of course, we're near the water, and that's what I want to make it to in the time that we have. Yep, so that is the origin of tobacco coming back here, thinking they had found a treatment for gout, but just how widespread it was. So even though I think it's fair to say that even we've misnamed a lot of things, and even the Americas we misnamed in their own way, but Columbus's actual achievement of sailing across was really a powerful achievement. Honestly, a notable, powerful achievement. So, one has to tip their hat to that. But goodness me, what a life. And you would sail out of here and then into that just incredible heat as you would have gone down to the Caribbean. And of course, they're totally dependent on the winds. Now, you see, there's a very quick integration from the old town, and we got a few of those narrow streets. I'm really glad that we had the well, Donna, I'm still not going to say amazing man, because, of course, he as well had an absolute belief that the people that he met over there were lesser than human. So that was still so, still so many elements. Yeah, as an explorer, given that some people, even though it was a much newer concept than one thinks, some people really believe the world is not round. Can you imagine thinking you might just fall off the edge of the road? That does take some nerve. However, the Greeks had calculated the circumference of the earth, so it is gutsy. And also, when I think about them out at sea like that, incredibly strict hierarchy. Obviously, I guess pretty much all men on the boats. Very staid food and boring. And this is the other thing we forget so often, is just how boring life could have been. These are tiny populations and huge distances. And of course, even in Spain, because it was battle after battle, whether it was the Romans coming in or the Moors or the Christians or whomever, there's a reason why all of these cities are round with walls, because you would have spent so much of your life doing not a great deal. And the poor farmers out in the fields, as always, were just there, well, classic feudalism. They were really supplying. They had to create enough of a food surplus that the elite could live. And so you do that until you were attacked by someone. And I really have to think hand-to-hand combat would have been pretty unpleasant. So sorry, I am heading over to the Riverside area, of course, because as this is the port, and as I say, if you haven't watched, I don't think it's my best video ever, but if you haven't yet watched my YouTube video on Portobello in Panama, please do, because that is where they were leaving from in the Americas, and this is where they were coming. And how would they know they were home? Well, they would know they were home by the Torre de Oro, the Golden Tower, which was not built at all as a golden tower. It was built once again by the Moors, by the Arabs, who really, particularly in Andalusia, just influences all the older architecture for several hundred years in around here. So yeah, you see that perfect, pretty round tower. Oh, honestly, Michelle, the architecture is so fascinating. And Seville does get too hot. And I mean, they say here, it's so funny when I was chatting away um, with my guide today, who I had actually met, funnily enough. Well, the problem is anyone who survived in tourism through the pandemic has been around for a long time. So she had been a guide with a group of mine whenever I was last here, 7 or 8 years ago. It's like, oh, Patrick, you've come back. What have you done for 2 years? Like, well, nothing. Um, but we were talking about, they always say, it's so funny um, how they say, oh, how you Canadians live in the cold, and then she said, but I suppose you could ask, how do we possibly live in the heat in the summer here? And I think it's a fairly fair question. Now, while I'm waiting for the light to change, let me just show you way up in the distance. You might see above the tree a tower. That is a bank tower that was only built a few years ago. I'm not sure exactly when, but it's the first time that a tower here in Seville was taller than the Giranda um, in well, 500 years. But no, that tower, excuse me, yeah, 900 years. The actual minaret tower was, of course, the biggest thing in the world. How am I doing for time? Not too well. But let me take you down to the river. So I'm sorry, just because I'm watching my stuff, city guiding, I'm missing some of the chat. I see people are having some good conversations. That's lovely. Obviously, this is just a little teaser of this really rather spectacular city. I really wanted to share this, and then when the weather came out so nicely today, I just felt I had to. The fact that this river is still navigable, um, yeah, Suzanne. Do you know I heard so I've heard last two towns actually. I've heard Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah being played, but so we're down here obviously in Andalusia now. So Andalusia, Castile, Leon, and Navarra are the four basic provinces that created the kingdom of Spain. And then, of course, Basque Country was brought in, Galicia, and Catalonia, which is still in. We'll see how long that lasts for. It's lovely, nice. Let me get in the shade. The said, oh, the palms, Robert. It's just, I would, for those who haven't been here, I really would recommend it. I am going down, so tomorrow I'm going to Granada, but I'm going to a place called Ronda. Feel free to Google Ronda and see why I would go there, because it's just so beautiful. The south coast for me in Spain, I find a little less appealing personally. By the way, Triana is the neighborhood on the other side, and that's where I went over and took everyone for flamenco last night. And it was interesting because it wasn't the one, traditionally the one that we went to was much smaller, but it was more of a flamenco school. And as a consequence, the quality of the music and everything was just so outstanding. Um, yeah, so the bull rings are still here. They still have bullfights down here. They don't in Catalonia anymore. So this is the more conservative side. Seville always had this really rather random, help me around that, a really random statistic that it had. The oh, are you? Is that right? That's nothing. It had the highest systemic youth unemployment in Europe. And you know how since we've been coming out of all emerging from this, global pandemic, we've actually had a shortage of staff. Like it's a real crisis in Banff. I know what it is the world over. I think maybe it's actually proven quite fortunate. Here's one of the many, many pussycats you see around, and I am a cat person. Um, but it's actually maybe created some more opportunity for people here that so much work has actually been kind of re-emerging. So I think that's sort of lovely. Now, what is another interesting thing, and I almost wish I haven't been able to do a YouTube video or anything driving down the roads, but you're in the city. So yesterday I took they're lovely, John. But I took the high-speed train, which is so good, down from Madrid, just 2 hours, and into Cordoba. And Cordoba's historic center is really distinctly Moorish as well, although you've got a stronger Roman hint to it. And then you leave there very quickly. When you get to the city edges, the cities stop much more quickly than they do, particularly in North American concept, because of course they were walled and more people live in apartments. Now, it is a little windy, I'm sorry about that. And so that plays a bit of a bigger role in the environment. It's something like, green rolling hills. Now, I've had rain for a couple of days, and it's interesting because my group is just a lovely group of people, and nobody's complained about that. It's been cooler and wetter than you would expect for a trip in Spain this time of year. On the other hand, they have been a total drought. So the bit of rain has been great news. But there is just a sense of where the old galleons dock, right here. So I'm just going to give you a zoom on that because I want to turn around because it's so windy. And that's what you get a sense. Can you imagine those things? Probably about that size, not as big as you think, sailing all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, sailing either into the port of Portobello. Um, no, Cindy, that's not a ship way in the distance. That's a factory way out there. It does look like a ship, though, indeed. And there are people actually paddleboarding. Let me just give you a full-on zoom. And they're using the river. The river's so clean right now. There's not a ton of industry. There they are. It did look like it was moving. It's actually when I zoom, I get quite a lot of movement in the screen. But boy, my reception, I was really glad, just talking from a technical point of view. When I was in Toledo, I didn't have time to do a tour, but I'm glad I kept dropping, like even my cell phone reception, everything. But here it's just been great and solid throughout our whole thing. They were paddleboards, Jen. Oh, Tableau, I haven't yet, Judy. But I don't think I'm going to. No, it's been it hasn't been an overly high paced tour. 12 days is nice. Let's say I have, most of these people in my group have traveled with me several different times. And, for them, this has been a dream well, they were with me 3 years ago in Ireland and Scotland. And they said, let's go to Spain next time. So it's been planned for 3 years. And then, of course, it was canceled. We've actually squeezed in quite a lot in the short time. But I did tell them today this is their one day if they want to do any shopping because our next couple of days are so full. But yeah, flamenco itself has its roots with the Gitan culture, with what you think of as the Roma culture. You might know it as Gypsy, and you do see people of that origin around. So that's the origin of it. That comes in here with a whole different movement of people, but it becomes co-opted, and of course, so much built into the history and the environment of Andalusia, particularly is the guitar. And I can tell you, my dad used to be able to play flamenco guitar, Spanish guitar, Gitano, exactamente. So, it's an incredible rich culture and a culture that has suffered as much persecution and abuse as some of the most abused identities. But the fact that that culture has survived in here in different forms and that their dance is adopted in and then adapted into what, and you would get lost here, but it was adapted in to the broader identity of this area. But it's a beautiful story, and if you watch it without understanding what each song is, sometimes you feel like you just want to cry, and other times you want to laugh. It is so deeply expressive. This was an original tower. It was one of the Arab towers, Moorish towers, for controlling the entrance to the water here. So they now call it the Tower of Gold, but it was originally an Arab tower for controlling the waterway. Remember, this is the one holy navigable river in all of Spain that's entirely in Spain. There's one other where you can sail out by Lisbon. Now, this is the only one totally in Spain, and it goes out by Cadiz. So when I'm in Gibraltar in a few days' time, we'll be looking out across at Cadiz, and I'm so tempted. I don't know how many people speak Spanish, but I'm so tempted to do a Spanish language tour while I'm in Gibraltar. Just kind of the irony of ironies. I thought that might be a fun one. But yeah, eso puede ser una buena idea. But it would be lovely and ironic. I find Gibraltar really kind of peculiar. It's an interesting random place. Oh, there's somebody just zipping down in a kayak here out in the river. Give you a little zoom. It is a beautiful sky. There's someone kayaking with the current, and that's the way down to Cadiz and the Mediterranean. And Cadiz is technically outside because it's just a tiny bit to the west of the Rock of Gibraltar. So it's still the Mediterranean, but it's the flags are just actually because they have these boat trips down here, Cheryl. So that's just what they are for. These are like your bateau mouche, And I actually hadn't even thought about it. Oh, Elizabeth, you should. Now, Elizabeth, you would love to come here, but you need to do that long after you come to Banff. Because, Elizabeth, we have the guest room for you and your family. So, goodness me. I know where you live for years, so it seems fair. But, all right, ladies and gentlemen, it is so lovely to share this. I was looking so forward to doing this tour. I have reused a shirt because I'm already so hot and I wanted a bit of sun protection on sleeves. And I've got the mask on here anytime we go in anywhere. But I am off in a little while. Oh, thanks, John. Well, I'm sure. Hey, Catherine, hugs to you. So yeah, Catherine, your gorgeous grandson is probably Well, I talked to him at about 6 this morning, my time. He's probably halfway, two-thirds of the way. So he lands in Fiji and he gets a whole day there and then over to Brisbane. So that'll be fun. All right, ladies and gentlemen, listen, thank you for your friendship and thank you, obviously, for your support. Um, One day now, I will always do my custom tour groups. They booked on Fiji Airlines because it was cheaper. So literally, but also it gave a break of a day in Fiji, which I think is a nice thing. You're probably all good, Mom. It is a gorgeous place, Fiji, and yeah, those are different stories for another day. But yeah, I stayed once in Tawauni, which is where they. But like these people here, most of them have traveled with me before. But really, I would love to find a way to do more and more just these virtual ones, and then just do a few custom trips or some local guiding. I've found traveling with a big group again, things like getting 18 suitcases onto a train and stuff. I end up doing it. I was getting a little, but I'll never stop guiding. But I like this way as well. So on that happy note, so I want to, as we always say, particularly now in the world, peace and love, and thank you for your friendship and partnership. And hola y abrazos desde esa ciudad increíble, acá en España. So it's sorry, my only complaint with Hagel these days when I use the app that has the Zoom, every now and then the chat just freezes up. So you're very welcome, everyone. So I missed a few comments there, but feel free if you have any questions, ask them in the camper van group there, and we can all connect. So I will see everyone a little bit later, and take care and be healthy and happy. I'll leave you one last few. Je vous en prie. It was MB. Mil gracias, Doña Jill. Bueno, amor, paz y bueno, una sola vida además. Entonces nos vemos luego. Les abrazo y nos vemos hasta muy pronto.